So, who exactly was John Keep and the Keep family? With that, I was very fortunate to speak with Patrick Duquette, who had by far done the most extensive research on this very subject. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Duquette. Duquette.
Hey, John. Glad to see you. Feel like talking today, and you know how much I love history. And let's get to it. Didn't know anything about John Keep except for one little item that was in a history book. It said the family was on the way to church from Longmeadow to Springfield, and they were attacked by Indians. And that was all I knew. So I started looking into it, and I felt there had to be more to this story than they shared in the history books. And it wasn't something that you could easily find. I talked to a few of his descendants, and they didn't know much more than me. They said like little tidbits like, well, the son raised pigs or something like that. So I was determined to get to the bottom of the story. And before I know it, I had page after page after page of historical fact. And I guess we might as well start on how he got over here and why. John Keep was one of the people that wanted to have a free England. They wanted to not have a king. They were tired of the monarchy, and it started a civil war. Most people came here because they just wanted to get away from the Civil War. John Keep had to go for his own health. There was a warrant out for his arrest from the Earl of Strafford. So he took the next boat to America. He ended up in Massachusetts in 1640, but we have no written record for the next 20 years until he purchased some land in Longmeadow, and he asked to be established in the city of Springfield. Well, it was a village at the time. They had a rule where you could stay in Springfield for 30 days, and then at the end of the 30 days, the council or the group that was running the city decided yay or nay to keep you, and they decided to keep John, and that was the first written record. They had a meeting and they said they were definitely going to keep him, and before you know it, he had 3 different jobs. One of them was Hayward and fence viewer, and it sounds like fence viewer is kind of a boring job, but it isn't, because the settlers' cattle used to break out of the pastures all the time. And when they broke out, that means they were trampling the Native Americans' corn. And that got the Native Americans into court because they would always complaining about the cattle stampeding. So the town established a fine for not having your fence in place and straight and strong. And John Keep was the guy that had to manage that. Well, let's move on a little bit. John established himself, and before you know it, he bought a parcel of land, Longmeadow. They called it, the Indians called it Massacre, and that's got him started. He got this biggest parcel was near Freshwater Brook, and it extended to what we know as Enfield, Connecticut.
Let's head down to the Longmeadow Flats and see if we can retrace the steps that John Keep and his family had traveled on their way to church on that fateful morning of March 26, 1676. Before us, the Keep family's 5-acre plot of land high on the bluff overlooking Freshwater, aka Raspberry Brook, near the Massachusetts-Connecticut line. This is going to be fun. Let's take a walk and retrace the steps that John Keep and his family had taken on that fateful morning, March 26, 1676. Here is my present location, and we'll be traveling north. Today's date, March 26th, and exactly 346 years had passed since that fateful morning. The current time, 7 a.m. I imagine John Keep and his family were already on the road, so to speak, for they lived the furthest from Sunday services, a distance of over 7.5 miles. Little word of advice, when traveling the flats of Longmeadow in the spring, wear a good pair of boots. Now, these conditions would have been mild compared to the travel in the 17th century, for the deep ruts created by the wagon wheel, cattle, and horses, especially in the springtime, would have made travel close to impossible. Not to mention the bone-jarring experience of travel on a two-wheeled cart pulled by a team of oxen with absolutely no suspension. According to records, this original road, which was first laid out in 1645, was a two-lane highway with the width of approximately 2 rods, which translates to about 33 feet in width. So the road before us would have been a two-lane, deeply rutted, muddy mess traveling north and south. Before us, a view from my drone as we travel north down the old Longmeadow Road. Down below, the corner of Long Pond Road and Bark Hall, 2022. Long Pond and Bark Hall, 1645. With Springfield in the background, we continue our travel down the old road to Springfield. I'm sure the authorities had set a time and place to meet before they, quote, hurried on through the fearsome narrow pass. My guess is here on the corner of Emerson and Long Pond. I superimposed present-day Longmeadow with the 1645 map. And to get your bearings, these buildings on the right is the Longmeadow Recycle Center on the corner of Emerson and Long Pond Road. With Captain John Whipple's 18 mounted militia, trailed by an estimated 20 parishioners traveling on ox carts, I imagine the column would have stretched a good distance along the road adjacent to the planting fields. We travel further parallel to the railroad tracks, heading north on the old road to Springfield. We're back on the two-lane muddy mess. A few hundred yards to go before we arrive at former Benjamin Cooley's 17-acre homestead. My current location? Just about here. And here we are. To my left, Cooley Brook flowing west to the Connecticut River. And to my right, Benjamin Cooley's 17-acre parcel of land. This most likely would have been the view from the road of Benjamin Cooley's home. The houses built by the first settlers were small, single-roomed homes. The furniture would be sparse, maybe a bench or two to sit on, small tables, some chests where they could store their various items. Inside the single room, the fireplace used for cooking and to keep the house warm through the dark, cold winter months. I think it's safe to say that the Cooley family had stoked the fire, so to speak, and had breakfast ready as the parishioners passed his home at the estimated time of 8 a.m. And I can also bet that the Cooley family gave a big wave as the column passed their home, heading to Sunday services. And here we are. From the Cooley homestead, we head north to the, quote, fearsome narrow pass. Interesting, this natural geologic feature, this ridgeline, the hill, ends at Massacre Brook, creating the narrow gap. It was a triangular piece of land, the point of which intruded itself into the narrow pass. So limited was the area that the grant was made with the provisions that the highway should always be allowed for whatever the river may eat out. I'm at the location where the land starts to narrow, about 150 yards from Massacre Brook. To the right, it's evident that the soil was moved to make way for the railroad tracks that were first laid in 1838. Let's head down to the shoreline. The Native Americans' best weapon was the element of surprise. For years, the Native Americans would terrorize the colonists with their surprise ambush and attacks. Quote, they come like foxes through the woods, which afford them concealment. They attack like lions as they surprise are made when they are least expected. They take flight like birds, disappearing before they had really appeared. To the left,
the Connecticut River. To the right, the steep red rock embankment. An ideal ambush site. Just about 100 yards to go before we cross the Pecosik. So what do you say we go back in time? This very spot, this very day, this very moment. With the coming of spring, Longmeadow folk gradually ventured out again. And on Sunday, the 26th of March, some of the people of Longmeadow, men, women, and children, ventured out to ride to Springfield to attend public worship in the company of several colonial troopers. John Keep's wife, Sarah, had given birth to a baby boy, Jabez, on December 11th, 1675. They were looking forward to his baptism at the first services in many months since the Indian attack on Springfield 5 months earlier. Through the streets of the hamlet, they passed the last house, the home of Benjamin Cooley, and hurried on through the fearsome narrow pass. Just as they approached the bridge over the Pecosik, shots rang out. Near Pecosik Brook, 7 or 8 Indians in the bushes fired upon the hindermost and killed a man and a maid, wounded others, and took 2 women with their babes. Meanwhile, the militia, hearing gunshots and fearing a massive Indian attack, the entire mounted militia and the churchgoers bolted for Springfield to drop off the women and children before returning to the attack site. Meanwhile, the 2 captured women with their babes were being led deep into the wilderness interior. And back at Court Square, the militia is mounted and ready for pursuit. But time is not on their side. First stop, the bridge that crosses the Pecosik Brook. Let's get back to the location of the ambush. It was a triangular piece of land, the point of which intruded itself into the narrow pass. So limited was the area that the grant was made with the provisions that the highway should always be allowed for whatever the river may eat out. Today, the railroad tracks completely occupy the restricted area. It was an ideal ambush point, and there is where John Keep was slain in 1676. Pecosik Brook, March 26, 2022. Pecosik Brook, March 26, 1676. Where the war party had most likely gathered before their surprise attack on the unsuspecting party of churchgoers. We're back with Patrick Duquette. I asked for his thoughts on what exactly happened in the first moments of the attack.
And it was probably 16 or 18 people from Longmeadow, and they gave them an escort of 18 or 20 militia mounted on horses. But the militia was all in front of the people that were going to church. They did not put a rear guard on this column, even though they knew there was Indian activity in the state. They followed a trail along the river, the Connecticut River, and it got to its narrowest point, and there was a new wooden bridge built there. And it was the tightest area in the location. The groups crossed. Find the last 2 families was John Keep and his wife on a horse, and another family had a cart. His wife and baby were in a cart. They were the very last. As soon as they got to the bridge, all hell broke loose, and 7 or 8 Indians let loose on them. John Keep and the man were killed right then and there. The brave militia bolted towards Springfield, not turning around to see what the gunfire was. As soon as they heard the first shot, they galloped with all the other people, and they said, oh, we wanted to get the other people safe, but they didn't want to have anything to do with marauding Indians. By the time they dropped everybody off in Springfield and came back, the only thing there was John Keep dead on the ground, and the other man whose name never got into the history books.
Thanks for watching, and part 3 is coming soon.